Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. How would you perform Taraweeh at home? There are various scenarios. The first thing is that we can perform all of our congregational prayers, meaning we can perform Salah with Jama'ah at home. This is our 5 times daily prayer, and this includes the Taraweeh prayer. So where there are enough members of the household, by all means perform Salatul Taraweeh at home with congregation. Whether or not you are a Hafiz, both situations. So we can perform Taraweeh prayer with congregation at home. It doesn't have to be in the masjid, to be clear. Number 2, if we are alone and we can't make congregational prayer, there's no one who can join us or there's no one who can lead us, we can perform the Taraweeh prayer on our own. The Taraweeh prayer is Sunnah Mu'akkada, so we shouldn't miss it. Number 3, what if there's no Hafiz in the household? Well, we would simply recite as much Quran as we know. So if we know several juz of the Quran, we would keep repeating those. And if we know less than that, we know half a juz, 1 juz, we would keep repeating that to the quantity of reciting a full juz daily if we can. So this is not the ideal situation, is that you can complete the whole Quran, because there are 2 sunnahs. One is the performance of the actual rak'at of Taraweeh prayer, and the other is the completion of the whole Quran. But where there's no Hafiz present to recite the amount that we are able to, is what we ought to do. And to add to this is the fact that we can continue to revise and memorize the Quran throughout our lives. We find that the senior Sahaba were all adults when they embraced Islam, and they became Hafiz in that adult period of their life. So there's no reason whatsoever to say that we cannot continue the process of Hifz through our adult life. Let us revive the Sunnah of the Sahaba and memorize more Quran this Ramadan, if we possibly can, and revise what we already know. So there, in simple terms, we ought to perform the Taraweeh prayer in the house. Where there are others present and we can perform with congregation, we ought to do it like that. Where this isn't possible, we can do it on our own. If you are a Hafiz, you then try to recite the entire quantity, and if you get stuck on the way, then just continue from where you remember. If this means missing an ayat or 2 or a section, go back to it in the next 2 rakats after having checked. And you can check for your own mistakes in a recording. You can record yourself, as many Hufaz already do. So don't let this prevent you from taking advantage of the blessing of Ramadan, and don't panic during your salah. As long as you're not having a prolonged silence and missing your qira'ah, recite from somewhere else when you get stuck. And the same applies for those who know less than the entire Quran. And if you know less, recite that and recite it repetitively if necessary. Another question here is about children. So a child who's not baligh, who's not reached the age of maturity, can he lead in prayer? No, unless it's other children like him in the household. And I'm saying this because there are many young people, mashallah, who are doing hifz at the moment. Some may be complete hufaz, and others are on their way certainly. So they can perform Taraweeh prayer with the other children of the house, other siblings, and lead those, or they can recite alone in nafil prayer, and they can recite aloud. You can recite aloud when you're reciting on your own, by the way. This applies to everybody in sunnah and nafil prayer, by all means. So they can recite aloud, but they wouldn't lead in prayer, because you need to be of age, you need to be mature according to Hanafi fiqh in order to lead the congregation. So there's a quick summary of how we might perform Taraweeh in our house. There's absolutely no reason to miss out, and you can't follow somebody remotely. So you can't turn on the TV and follow the Imam of the Haram, nor can you do that in any local place. If you have to be physically in the same place for the congregation to be a congregation, so that's not an option. May Allah Azza wa Jal grant us tawfiq to make the most of this Ramadan. There's the day of Ramadan with the fasting, and there's the night with the nighttime prayer. And let me clarify, Taraweeh is a separate sunnah and Tahajjud is a separate sunnah. Tahajjud is something which Rasulullah ﷺ did all year round. Taraweeh is something the Prophet ﷺ led the Sahaba in for 2 to 3 nights. That's the basis and foundation of it. And then the Prophet ﷺ gave the reason why he didn't continue. He says he didn't want it to become wajib on the ummah. Had he done it, and Allah would have then authorized it as a permanent preference for the ummah, it may have become an obligation, and the Prophet ﷺ knew that his own ibadah had so much value in the court of Allah, so he made it easy for us by not continuing, so that the weak and those who are not so strong in their deen perhaps would not become sinful in a major way as a consequence. So this doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. The Sahaba continued the sunnah, the Sahaba continued to perform nighttime prayer in the time of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, in the time of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu sees that there are lots of small congregations happening in different corners of the masjid. He simply united them behind one single imam, which was Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu anhu, a very big alim and qari amongst the Sahaba. And so all of the gathering and all of the congregation in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ at this time consisted of tabi'een and Sahaba. So this is the early generations of Islam, and they were all united upon this. And then, as though if we want further sort of reassurance on this issue, then we can continue to look through history. Come the time of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, all through his khilafah, the Taraweeh continued. Come the time of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, all through his time as Khalifa, the Taraweeh continued. In fact, when he saw the masjids so full in Ramadan, he made dua to Allah for Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. He said, "O Allah, fill the grave of Umar with nur as he has filled our masajid." And then Sayyidina Hassan radiallahu anhu, and then Amir Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. So throughout the history of Islam, for these 14 centuries, there have always been 20 rakats of Taraweeh in the majority, the vast majority of the Islamic world, and in the two harams as well. So we ought to continue now. And this situation of not being able to come to the local masjid is not really a valid reason of leaving this precious sunnah which brings to life the nights of Ramadan. So may Allah Ta'ala grant me tawfiq, and may He grant you all tawfiq. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.